Okay, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Shavuos Daf Zion, and we're starting toward the bottom of Vav Amud Beis, about 9 lines or so, 10 lines from the bottom at the two dots. Here we're going to get back into really the primary sugya of the Mishnah, which is referred to as Yedios HaTuma. And we spoke about a lot of different permutations. If I knew about the Tuma before, I knew about the Tuma after, but in the middle I had a Ha'elam, I forgot, and then I either ate something that I shouldn't have eaten while I was Tameh, or went into the Makam HaMikdash. So then you'd be Chayiv, as our Mishnah taught us, a Korban Olav Yored, a very rare type of Korban. So let's start picking this apart. The Gemara says again, Vav Amud Beis, 10 lines from the bottom, Es sheyesh ba yediyah betchila v'chule. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanon, Minayin she'ein hakasav medaber el betumas mikdash v'kadashav. Our Mishnah had an assertion, and the assertion was that this Korban Olav Yored, when we talk about Yedios HaTuma, was that it was talking about Tumas Mikdash v'kadashav. How do we know that? The din with the Gemara says it's very logical. I can show you why we would assume that. Hoel vehizhir ve'onash al hatuma v'chayev korban al hatuma, because the Torah forewarned us and it gave a punishment as well. In a case where someone b'mezid did one of these things, because obviously if you're being hizhir ve'onash, your punishment, the azhara is the lab. If you're then getting the punishment of the chumash, it means you did it b'mezid. So if that's true, al hatuma v'chayev korban al hatuma, that we would have these punishments. So then the following would be true. Makshe hizhir ve'onash al hatuma, lo hizhir ve'onash ela al tumas mikdash v'kadashav. Just like that, when the Torah forewarned us about, they gave us an azhar and an onash on the tuma, it was only true about tumas mikdash v'kadashav. Af kshechiyev korban al hatuma lo chayev ela al tumas mikdash v'kadashav. Then, when a person were to do this b'shogeg, then they would be chayev only on tumas mikdash v'kadashav. Now, to be fair and really for academic integrity purposes, it would be very helpful for us to learn the Rashi of Hoel v'hizhir v'onash al zidon hatuma. But most importantly, we're really going to skip just to the psukim portions, where you can see it says at the end of the first long line that it says there, Shenemar lo yitameu es mikdashi harei ze azharas mikdash b'kach mal yochal ad shita harei az azharas kodesh. So all the psukim teach us the azharas and all of the onshin. So we know about mikdash v'kadashav, that when our Mishnah, teaches us about the korban of Olav Yored, when there was a person who had a yediyah, and then he forgot, and then he had another yediyah, he remembered later, and in the middle he did something wrong. That something wrong that he did must be mikdash v'kadashav, per the psukim that Rashi quotes over here. Says the Gemara, not necessarily. Ve'ema. Perhaps we should say that the case of Yedias Tuma that our Mishnah is talking about is not just mikdash v'kadashav, but rather is ve'ema truma shehizhir v'onash. We also know that the Torah says that a person who's tameh is not allowed to touch truma, and there the Torah forewarns it's a chiyuv misa, your hizhir v'onash. It says the Gemara, lo ashkechan avon misa d'chiyuv alei korban. The Gemara here presents a shtickle chiddush. I wouldn't have known this. I would have thought that any time a person does an isur deoraisa b'shogeg, they're chayav a korban chatas. Here, the Gemara makes an assertion that lo ashkechan, we don't have a case scenario where, in a case of an avon misa, where the punishment of the lab is misa, and then the chayav aleha korban. It's only true when the lab is a kares. So let's say by Pesach, if a person, God forbid, eats chametz, which is an isur deoraisa, I'm always very torn. A bris during Pesach, their mom is serving bagels from Kaufman's. So they're avoiding the Isser Kares of bris milah by getting gemalt. The father is avoiding that Isser Kares while they're eating bagels. Kimat. It's a very, I don't know, what's my role? To tell them, to not tell them? By the way, it's Passover.
Not by the price when you would eventually do the bris in a week.
Not at this age, right? I have a psak like that in general from Rabbi First.
That's for Shabbos.
It's not just for Shabbos.
I'm talking about
yeah.
It's not inherent.
It has nothing to do with the bris.
Not inherent.
Right. That's what you mean. Yeah.
Right. Sorry, you're saying what to wait?
He's saying to postpone.
I'm really asking academically.
It's a svara. Do you postpone a bris? I've never, it's what he said.
Pesach party fee is $5 as much.
Seriously, I should just offer to bring a tray, So complicated.
Academically, I'm asking, not chayav kares, you know what I'm saying? You can fix it in a week, not the chayav kares.
Yeah.
But you
The Isser Kares anyways wouldn't kick in until he's older, and it's not. The father, interestingly, doesn't get the chiyuv kares. It's a din in the kid.
So, totally, I'm asking totally academically, I can't imagine that's the psak.
One of the things that I have found happened is that I found this interesting iteration when families talk. That's what he's saying. But if I postpone the bris and said, look, it's actually better to postpone this bris till after Passover for Jewish legal reasons. Let's say I gave that svara kozebes to them. It's not really.
Avoid them.
By the way, they're going to eat a bagel anyways. Yeah. I actually think there's no link between the two fundamentally, and I don't even know that one impacts the other halachically. It's just uncomfortable, which is also a reality in certain scenarios. Today I did a bris, a Yiddish woman and a mixed race family. Fascinating, just fascinating. Halachically a Yid.
Good by me.
I know, it worked for you. It was Jewish on the right side, It was Noah Rosen and I were texting. He sent me a GIF of two boys running at each other, giving each other hugs. He's like, we're friends again, because he knew that I was going to come in this morning and patra the room. I'm like, Noah, 41 years of friendship. It's Tachanun that keeps us together. Shagets. Only on a Thursday. Unbelievable. I'm not worthy of a Wednesday. So the Gemara wants to know, perhaps that our pasuk is talking about Truma. The Gemara says no. We only have korbanos of olav yored when it comes to the world of an Isser with kares, and then you do something wrong, then there's a korban. But over here, by Truma, that can't be what's going on. Because by Truma, where the Isser doesn't lead to kares, but rather to Misa, so there we don't have a korban when you do something b'shogeg. Ema, hani mili korban kavua. When do we say that rule that there is no korban b'shogeg? That's only when the korban is kavua. Aval, turning to the top of Zion, aval olev yored nesi. But perhaps we should say that when it comes to the korban of our Mishnah, the korban of Yedios Tuma, which is a korban olev yored, it's a sliding scale, as we would say in our modern parlance, that if you're wealthy, you pay the full price, the large animal. And if you're poor, you can go as low as flour, a korban mincha. So then nesi, maybe we should say that taka, there is going to be a korban, and maybe truma should be included. Just like our Mishnah, where you do something that you shouldn't have done. Shavuos edus, Rashi says, or Shavuos bitui deisnahu nami b'korban olav yored. Ve'eno nashal donan lo misa v'lo kares. If you do something wrong in edus, maximum you're going to get malchus, and that's only according to some shitas. There we see a korban. So the Gemara says, Amar Kra, no. How do we know that our Mishnah, when it talks about Yedias Tuma, is only talking about Mikdash v'Kadashav? It's only talking about eating foods you're not supposed to, Behelam, Tuma, or going into the Mikdash. Says the Gemara, Amar Kra, Ba. What is the actual pasuk? Vayikra Parakeh pasuk Gimel. O chi yiga betumas adam l'chol tumaso asher yitma ba. Right. The Gemara says ba lemeute truma. So you're right. In theory, it would have fit, but we have a word excluding truma. So therefore, it's not. And therefore, our Brisa and our Mishnah, when we talk about Yedias Tuma, is only talking about a case where we're talking about Mikdash v'Kadashav. So says the Gemara. Says the Gemara, how do you know that the word Ba comes to exclude Truma? Perhaps Ba is Lemiute Mikdash, it should say v'Kadashav. How it should say that the lo sagi le bekorban olav yored, that a korban olav yored might not be enough. Maybe I could have argued another way. The truma is really what our Mishnah is talking about. That if you eat truma, you're chayav korban olav yored. But perhaps when it comes to mikdash v'kadashav, it's lo sagi le bekorban olav yored. That korban's not stark enough. Demaisi korban kavua, a regular chatas. Now, an olav yored is begeder chatas, but it's not the chatas that we talk about, of that one animal that's brought, and there's no sliding scale, you did the aver, you're chayav to pay. So that's a great question. It's a little existential to our Mishnah. We don't know if our Mishnah is now talking about what we think, which is mikdash v'kadashav, my ha'elam tuma, or are we talking about truma? We don't know. And it's definitely not both, because the word ba excludes something. So the Gemara says, and I love seeing the praise of Amoraim to Tanaim, says the Gemara, Kari Rava alei de Rebbe. Rava, who lived 200 years after Rebbe, approximately, a little bit less, probably 100 years, he said, Dole mayim miboro samukim. He is drawing water from deep pits. I love it. Poetic, beautiful. Says the Gemara, what does Rebbe hold? The Tanya. The Brisa says, this is a Brisa we will learn again in Chulen. Rebbe Omer, Ekra ani chaya. The pasuk says the word chaya, which is a small animal. Behema lama nemra. So let's look at the pasuk to see what Rebbe is talking about. The pasuk says in Vayikra Hey pasuk beis, O nefesh asher tiga, a person who touches bechol davar tameh, anything that's tameh, o benivlas chaya tmeya, or if he touches the nevela, the corpse of a small animal, o benivlas behema tmeya, or if he touches that, and then the end of the pasuk says, "V'nevla mimenu tameh v'ashem." He made a mistake and he became tameh. Then he's guilty. He'll have to bring the korban ola v'yored. So what Rebbe wants to know is behema lama nemra. Chaya is enough. If by a chaya, if you touch it, you become tameh. Pashut by a behema, you're going to become tameh, and the Torah doesn't use extra words. So behema lama nemra nemar kan behema tmeya. Over here by our pasuk, it says behema tmeya. V'nemar lahalan behema tmeya, and it also says the same thing in another pasuk in Vayikra. So therefore, ma lahalan tumas mikdash afkan tumas kod ma lahalan tumas kodesh afkan tumas kodesh. Talking about going into the kodesh. So that's half of our answer because we need mikdash v'kadashav. We have the mikdash part. So it says the Gemara ashkechan tumas kodesh. Sorry, we have the food part. Tumas mikdash minolan. How do we know that that is included as one of the categories of our Mishnah? So it says the Gemara Amar Kra b'chol kodesh lo siga ve'el mikdash lo savo iskash mikdash l'kodesh. Ihachi says the Gemara iskash mikdash l'kodesh. So let's pause here for a second. So here we have Rebbe's answer in full, the answer that Rava likes. We might have thought that perhaps our Brisa and our Mishnah are talking about not mikdash v'kadashav, but rather that we're talking about truma. So says the Gemara, that's not possible because of Rebbe's Gzeira Shava Behema Tmeya, which taught us about Kodesh, part 1, and part 2 is Bechol Kodesh Lo Siga, the hekish of Mikdash and Kodesh. So says the Gemara, got it, but we have a problem. Ihachi Trumanami the Amar Bechol Kodesh Lo Siga Rabo Sesa Truma. The problem is that if what you're saying is that we're learning from that pasuk of Bechol Kodesh Lo Siga, well, we have an explicit brisa that says that that's talking about truma. So now the pasuk that you want to say is telling me that our Mishnah and brisa are focusing on mikdash v'kadashav. That same pasuk is also the Rabos Esat Truma. So now we should have 3 things in the hopper in our Mishnah for Yedias Tuma and in the brisa, which is mikdash, kadashav, and truma. Says the Gemara, no. You're right that it says B'chol Kodesh Lo Siga, but Truma is different in our case because Hamid Rachmana Ba. We rejected this answer before, so now we get to use it again. Is that perhaps for the word Ba, we can exclude Truma. Says the Gemara, Ema Ba Lemute Mikdash. Maybe we should say that the word Ba is not to exclude Truma, but it's to exclude our case and include Truma. So it says the Gemara, a third of the way down on Zayin and Aleph Mistabra, Mikdash Lamim Ma'atinon. It doesn't make sense to exclude Mishnah. Shekain Bekares Kamosa. Because the case of Mikdash and Kodesh, they both have a din of Kares. And that common denominator is pretty yisodistic. It's Mila and it's the Asay of Korban Pesach. So they're thematic. They're thematic. Says the Gemara, fine, but I can show you another theme. Adarabba. We should say Truma Lo Ma'atin and keep the eating of Truma, the Tuma of Truma involved. Shekain Achila Kamosa. If you eat something in the Mikdash, that's V'kadashav. Those two are both Achila. Says the Gemara, you're 100% right. So how then do we know whether or not we should learn Ba to be Mama'et Truma, or if we learn Ba to be Mama'et Mikdash? So says the Gemara, Elama Rava, Shalosh Krisos Beshlamim Lama. Why does the Torah say the word Krisos 3 times by Shlamim? If you are a Baal Koreh and you know the Torah pretty well, and certainly if you're halachic in nature and you know the Torah well, you'll know, which I didn't, that the word krisus was used 3 times throughout the Chamisha Chumshei Torah around the space of Shlamim. Why? Says the Gemara, Achas Leklal. One of them is to teach a general rule. Ve'achas leprat. One is to teach us an individual rule, and there are very lengthy Rashis on this on the right side. Learn them at your leisure. And the last one is ve'achas l'tuma haksuba b'torah stam ve'eni yodea mahi. And another one is referring to a case of tuma that the Torah talks about, but I don't know what it is, meaning a lack of yedias. Havi Omer, what is that? What is that third word of krisus for that Rava highlights? Says the Gemara, that third one is tumas kodesh. But we really don't need tumas kodesh because, as we learned above, we've already solved that problem from the hekesh. We learned iskash mikdash lekodesh. So if I have this extra word of krisos and you want to apply it by tumas kodesh, but v'imeno inyan letumas kodesh, then because we learned it above, the nafkale midirebi, the gzeira shava of behema tmeya and behema tmeya, then tnei inyan letumas mikdash. So now we have kodesh and mikdash. Kaftor vaferach, we're good to go. We have all of our sources that indicate, like we've seen and like we assumed in our Mishnah, that when the brisa that we started with today, and when our Mishnah discusses the world of Yedias Tuma with all of its iterations, so that's talking about Tumas Mikdash v'Kadasha. Hold on one second. That third word of Krisos can't be to teach me about Tumas Mikdash because we actually need that third word of Krisos to teach us about Rabbi Abo. What did Rabbi Abo say? Rabbi Abo, Shalosh Krisos b'shlamim lamali, achas leklal, ve'achas leprad, ve'achas ledvarim she'eino nechalin. He has a very unique din. He says that the reason why it says Krisos in three cases is if you eat something that's inedible, you eat the wood that was designated for the pyre. So he says, then you're going to be chayav kares. It's not even a food. In fact, in halacha, it's lav shmei achila. That's why, if you looked by Pesach in the CRC guide, there's a letter signed by Rabbi First and by Rabbi Reese that says that any pill that you swallow is lav shmei. They don't write this language, but the lumdus behind it is that it's lav shmei achila, and that a person should just take their pills as normal, even if it has chametz mamish. That's not achila. Swallowing things whole is not achila. It's just pashut, not food. That's not the way we chew. So it's difficult to see this, but you don't have to worry too much because Reb Shimon amar dvarim she'eino ne'echalim ein chayav l'kares mishum tuma. So he says if you're tamei and you eat the wood of the pyre, so pashut, you're not chayav. So what does he use that third word of kares for? The suye chatos hapnimios is to talk about the chatos that's brought in the inner mizbeach, the mizbeach hazahav, which is in the heichal, the sal kadaita chamina. I might have thought, and this is really a tangent, but it's just teaching us what that third word of krisos means, which is going to bring us back to the drawing board. What did Reb Shimon hold that the third word of krisos comes to teach us? The salkadaita chamina. Any korban that's not able to be brought on the outer mizbeach, the mizbeach hagadol, like a shlamim, then ein chayavin alem mishum pigul. Then if you have a machshava zara during that korban, it's not going to passel the korban. Mishum tumanami lo. I might have had a havamina that because pigul doesn't apply in that mizbeach and with those kinds of korbanos that are not bringable, that are not eligible to be brought on the Mizbeach HaGadol. So I might have thought that there's no tuma there either, and there's no iser kares of eating that food betuma. Says the Gemara, Kamash Malan Mechayim. So he uses that word of krisos, the third appearance of the word krisos, to teach me that unique din, which means that it's not available to teach me that our Mishnah is talking about tumas mikdash. So how do we know that that's true? So says the Gemara, 9-10 lines from the bottom on Zayin and Aleph. You're right. But I have another Mari Makom that can teach us how we know that our Mishnah is speaking both about Kodesh and, as we're trying to prove now, about Mikdash. Amri Nahardoi, they said in Nahardah, Mishmei de Rava, Shalosh Tumos Bishlamim Lama. Of course, we learned above that it says Krisis 3 times by the world of Shlamim, but guess what? It also says Tuma by the world of Shlamim 3 times. So Zag's the Gemara. Why do we have 3 times? Achas leklal, v'achas leprat. One is to teach us the general rule that we have this world called Tuma by Shlamim. One is to teach us a prat, the individual halachos of each animal. And then lastly, v'achas letuma ksuva b'torah stam ve'eni yodea mai. The last is talking about an unknown type of Tuma. And what is that? Have Omer, Tumas Kodesh. Okay, now we're not trying to find out about Kodesh. We proved that already. We're trying to find out about Mikdash. So the Gemara says, "V'meinu inyan the tumas Kodesh to nafkalemi the Rebbe." We learned that above from the Gzer Shava behemat tmea toward the top of the page. So therefore, the word tuma, the third usage of the word tuma that Rava brings by the world of Shlamim is extra. Therefore, tneu inyan letumas Mikdash. So now again, another possible approach. Still, the Gemara is still like, you almost feel like they want this to be the answer. We're moving in this direction that our Mishnah and the Brisa that we started with today is only talking about a Korban Olav Yored as it relates to the Isser of Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashah. Says the Gemara, that doesn't work either. Because V'hai Nami, the last usage of the word Tuma of the three, we still need that. Why? Because I did the Boil Michtav Kares Lech Rabbi Abo, just like Rabbi Abo needed to teach that word, to teach us that the chatos panimios, because he was telling us, remember that Reb Shimon was of the opinion that if the animal can't be carved on the mizbeach hachitzon, then there's no pigul and perhaps no tuma. Not only do we need the word kares to teach us that, but kasav nami tumos de lo sagi labalav hachi. If I only had the word kares without the word tuma, I would have made a mistake. We need both of those words. So, in summary, so far, we know that there's the word tuma, which we know that there's the word krisus by shlamim 3 times, and we know that there's the word tameh by shlamim 3 times. So says the Gemara, both of them are needed to teach the din above of Rabbi Abahu that we saw, that Rabbi Abahu quotes that the din of not being able to eat the wood, inedible objects, I should say, betuma. So Ella, says the Gemara, we still don't have a perfect answer about Mikdash. We know Kodesh, but not Mikdash. How do we know what our Mishnah is talking about? 2 lines from the bottom. Ella Amar Rava Asya Tumaso. We have a Gzer Shava. Ksiv Hacha Lechol Tumaso. Over here in the pasuk we read earlier of O Chi Yiga Betumas Adam Lechol Tumaso Asher Yitma Ba V'Neh Lamimenu V'Hu Yada Ve'Ashem. There it says Lechol Tumaso. And turning to the top of Daf Zayin and Bezin Amir Tashem will wrap up to the top of Daf Ches and Aleph. Uchsiv Hasam, another pasuk says in Bamidbar, Tamei Yihyeh Od Tumas Abo, Malahalan Tumas Mikdash, Avkan Tumas Mikdash. So again, we're back to where we hoped we would be, which is that our Mishnah is cleanly understood, namely, that when our Mishnah speaks about the Korban of a Korban Olav and Yord by Yediyah Satuma, it's talking about a case of Mikdash V'Kadashah. What would this approach of Rava do with the word ba? Ve'ela ba lamali. So the Gemara teaches a chiddush. The word ba is lerabos, before we use the word ba, to exclude. Now we're going to flip the script and we'll see why in a moment. Lamali. What do we do with the word ba? Lerabos nevelas of tahor. That, forget behema, even if I ate an oaf that was tahor, so let's say a chicken, but it was misnabel. It was shot with an arrow, right? And I am tameh and I ate that, so that's going to be problematic. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. You forgot the top of Daf Zayin Amud Aleph. Because on the top of Zayin Amud Aleph, when we attempted to use the drasha of ba, it was lema'id, to exclude. But over here, it says, ve'ela ba lamali l'rabos nevelas of tahor. So the mechanism of the word ba previously was to exclude, and now you flipped the script to say that it's to include. Asks the Gemara, ha'amor ba mi'utahu. An amud ago, you didn't say this. An amud ago, you said that the word ba was exclusionary when we tried to say, nah, our mikdash, our pasuk and our Mishnah are for sure talking about mikdash v'kadashav. How do we know? Because it can't be truma, because ba is lemay truma. Now you're saying it's lerabos nevelas oftar. Ha'amras ba mi'utahu. Says the Gemara, mishum de mi'utahu aiser. It's because of the fact that it's mi'uta, because of the fact that we have this negative diuk aiser, we know that it's extra. What does this mean? And the Gemara explains. Ksiv, one pasuk says oki yiga, and this is a limiting terminology. It's a mute. What does this mean? Only the bar negia in, the la bar negia lo, only something that you become tameh through touch. If the animal won't be matame you through touch, then that's not what we're talking about. So that's limiter number 1. And then uchsiv ba, which is the second mute. What do we know now? Uchsiv ba miuta, have a miut achar miut, vein miut achar miut, ela lerabos. So then the Gemara says that we have this double negative, and that is how we know, and this is a chiddush, that is how we know that the word ba comes to include something. It's a double negative, which is a positive. -2 times -2 is a +4. So that's what the Gemara is teaching us over here. We have a double negative. The double negative is l'rabos. What is it coming to be, Marbet? That if I became tame by eating even an oaf, it's not a behema. We have rank of quality of food. Meat is better than chicken. Even midoraisa, according to some Tanaim, chicken is like fish. Midoraisa, that's likely the case. We're super makbid on it with kimat velo. There's almost no distinctions in halacha at all between chicken and meat. One difference might be if chicken got stuck in your teeth as opposed to meat, the din might be a little bit different because it's not as fibrous-y. Another din, we're makbid here too, but by Hilchos Nida, we have an application that if a woman's going to the mikveh on Friday night or on Yontiv, we recommend that they shouldn't avoid eating meat and chicken on those nights because there's a mitzvah to have oneg Shabbos. But we do recommend that they're super careful about cleaning out their teeth on those nights. If a woman's going to the mikveh during the week, she should not eat meat, and we're machmir even on chicken. Af al pi, that chicken is not fibrous-y, the same way that meat is. So they have a different texture to them. Chicken is very chewable and soft. Meat often can get stuck in your teeth. So, but here, the Gemara has a chiddush, is that we say that the din of tum of our Mishnah also applies in regards to nevelas of tahor. Okay, the Gemara on Zayin Amud Beis turns to some of the more detailed aspects of, I should say, actually, more korbanos about the kapara aspects of what we learned in our Mishnah, and says the Gemara as follows. In the two dots there, yesh ba yediyah b'tchila ve'ein ba yediyah b'sof, seir hanase bifnim will cover you. Let's say that you knew that you were tamei at 9 in the morning, you forgot and went to a holy place or ate something tahor at 10 in the morning. 9 you were tahor, 10 you ate, and then you never found out again. Ve'ein ba yediyah b'sof. So the halacha is in the Mishnah that seir hanase bifnim, the seir la'Hashem, will protect you. Let's get into some of the details. The Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, v'chiper ala kodesh mitumos b'nei Yisrael. There will be atonement for the kodesh of the tumah of b'nei Yisrael. So it says the Gemara, Yeshli be'inyan, I have a havamina, zelahavi shalosh tumos, that perhaps the pasuk will cover us in the following 3 areas. How so, or what would they be? Tumas avodah zarah, v'tumas gilui arayos, v'tumas shvichos damim. We're going to question this at the bottom of the page, but let's get through this. B'avodah zarah hu omer leman timei es mikdoshi. There we see the word tamei. B'gilui arayos omer shmartim mishmarti lebilti asas mechukos atavos v'chule v'los tamu uvahem. Don't become tamei in these averus of arayos. That's number 2. So we see tuma by both avodah zarah and by arayos. And b'shvichus damim hu omer v'los tamei es haaretz. V'los itmat haaretz. You should not make the ground tamei by shvichus damim. Don't kill. So we see that there's tumah in all 3 of those cases. So perhaps, says the Gemara, Yachal al gimel tumos halalu yehe seir v'mechaper, that maybe the seir la'Hashem will cover people who do these 3, the big 3. Says the Gemara, I wouldn't mess around. Talmud Lomar, you're not going to be covered. Tanu Rabbanan, mitumos b'nei Yisrael, v'lo kol tumos. Not every type of tumah is going to be covered by the seir la'Hashem. And the Gemara says now, a mematzinu. Mematzinu shechilek akasav mechlal kol tumos. Aveomer tumas mikdash v'kadashav is one category. Avkan b'tumas mikdash v'kadashav divir bihuda, that perhaps the only type of iser that will be covered, the only type of tuma that's done, that's achieved through an iser that will be covered is mikdash v'kadashav, but not the big 3. And that is in fact the case. We assume that the seir la'Hashem does not cover the tuma from avodah zarah, gilui arayos, and shvichus damim. Reb Shimon agrees in principle, but not in the learning. Reb Shimon Omer, mimakomahu muchra. You're right, he says to Rabbi Yehuda. I agree with you, but the diuk is different. There's no mematzinu. It's just the pasuk itself. You went too far. Harehu Omer v'chiper la kodesh mitumos. Mitumos shel kodesh. Period. There's no mematzinu. So this is a methodological question of how do they darshan? What's the difference in a mematzinu and not a mematzinu? Not for now. But that's what the Gemara says. 2/3 of the way down on Zayin Amud Beis, the Gemara says, Yachol al kol tuma shebekodesh yehei seir zeh mechaper maybe I might have thought that on every tuma of the Kodesh, the shiur would be mechaper, and perhaps even if I knew, this is what's not in the words, but let's say I knew Yediyah B'tchila and Yediyah B'sof, so maybe it should be mechaper there. Says the Gemara, not necessarily. If you knew about your tuma before and after, let's see, Talmud Lomar, umi pishehem l'chol chatosam, chatoim dumya depshoim, a chet, which is in this context a shogeg, and a pesha, which is a willful intent avera. Ma pshaim she'enan b'nei korban. We know, of course, if a person does an avera b'mezid, they do. If it's a pesha, so then there's no korban. Af chatoim she'enan b'nei korban. There's also going to be case scenarios where there's a chet that is not b'nei korban. And that is the case of where, of avchataim, hold on one second, of avchataim she'enam b'nei korban. Yes, we have some sins that a person that can do that are not b'nei korban. What's that case? That's talking about where there's no yediyah b'sof. We just think in logistics. If you never know that you did something wrong, you're never going to be chayav korban. You never came back around. So that's what the Gemara is saying over. So this is the brisa that we've been learning over the last little bit of this page, really starting toward the top of this page. And now we're going to start picking it apart. We're only going to learn one rapid analysis of one part of this again, and then we'll pause at the top of Chesed Aleph. And on Shabbos, we'll be able to catch up because if you can look ahead, Chesed Beis is short, Testament Aleph is short, and Testament Beis is medium. So we'll be able to catch up on Shabbos. And Omar Mar, 6 lines from the bottom of Zayin Amud Beis. Yesh li be'inyan zeh lahavi gimel tumos. We had said maybe there would be 3 tumos. Tumas avodah zarah, tumas gilui arayos, tumas shvichus zav. The Gemara wants to say, what are these cases? Hay avodah zarah hechidami, ibn mezid bar ktalahu. If you do avodah zarah on purpose, we're not talking to you about korbanos. We're talking to you about killing you. It's very simple. And ibishogeg, then bar korbanu. And if you are a shogeg, then you're a bar korban. But that doesn't match with our Mishnah that said that the korban doesn't really help. And b'mezid and b'mezid says the Gemara. Oh, so the Gemara responds, what case of avodah zarah are we talking about? B'mezid. Yes, he did it b'mezid, but you're not a bar katola because v'lo asrube, nobody warned you. Or it's b'shogeg, but v'lo isyadale, he didn't know that he had done that. What about gilui arayos, top of Chesed Aleph? How does the brisa factor in and understand the case of gilui arayos? Gilui arayos nami hechidami. What was the case over there? Ibn mezid bar ktalu. If a person has an illicit relationship with someone that they shouldn't, so then they should be killed. No korbanos. Ibn shogeg, then bar korban. And if you slept with someone that you thought was, let's say I don't know how you sleep with someone b'shogeg, but let's say you have 2 people who are identical twins. One is your spouse and one is not your spouse. So there could be a shogeg in cases like that. So ibn shogeg bar korban hu, that should be a korban. But so what's the case of gilui arayos? It must be b'mezid v'lo asrbe. Yes, it was intentional. You did something wrong, but there was no hasra, so you're kind of in between. And b'shogeg v'lo isyadale. And in shogeg cases that, or where you just never knew on the other side that you ever did anything wrong. So that could be the case of our brisa on the bottom of Zayin Amud Beis. And lastly for tonight, says the Gemara, Shvichus damim nami hechidami, ibn mezid bar ktalahu, ibn bar golosu. If you killed someone on purpose, no korbanos are going to help you. You deserve to die. And ibn if you killed someone by accident, so korbanos don't help you. You're a bar golosu. So says the Gemara, what's the case of Shvichus damim in the brisa, b'mezid v'lo asur, you did kill on purpose, but there were no witnesses. B'shogeg v'lo isyad alei, inami b'hanach delav b'nei galus ninhu. Or we're talking about cases where when people kill, there are some unique scenarios that we learned in the previous Masechta. There are some unique scenarios where they don't go to galus for a whole host of reasons. So that's one analysis of the brisa. And tomorrow we're going to pick up 8 lines down right here at Amar Mar and Chesed Aleph, and we'll continue analyzing the brisa and learn Daf Ches and Daf Tes on Shabbos. Wishing you all a beautiful night.